Hi there tonight. We are traveling to the heart of China, to a place where a silent grassy hill holds a secret bigger than any pyramid. You're going to walk the grounds of a long-dead emperor's final resting place, a place so well defended that if you were an ancient tomb robber, you almost certainly wouldn't survive the attempt. Even today, we can't get inside. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey begins here, on the quiet plains of Lintong district just outside the bustling modern city of Xi'an. The air is still. The tourist crowds have vanished with the daylight, and the only sound is the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Before you rises a great mound of earth, some 15 stories high, sprawling over an area that could swallow a small town. It's covered in pomegranate trees and unassuming grasses, looking for all the world like a natural hill that has been sitting here since the dawn of time. But it's not. This is a man-made pyramid of packed earth, a monument of such scale that it has spent 2 millennia trying to disguise itself as a feature of the landscape. And it's done a pretty good job. Over 2,200 years of wind and rain have softened its edges, patiently wearing it down. Historians believe it was once much taller, perhaps nearly the height of a 30-story building. Archaeologists debate the original shape of the mound, with some ancient texts suggesting it was a true stepped pyramid, a geometric marvel that has since slumped into this soft, organic shape. It's a quiet, peaceful place now. But don't let the tranquility fool you. You are standing on top of one of history's greatest and most dangerous secrets. Beneath your feet lies the tomb of China's first emperor, a man named Ying Zheng, who would later be known to all the world as Qin Shi Huang. And he didn't just build a tomb for himself. He built a scale model of his entire universe, an underground empire he intended to rule for all eternity. This gentle hill is merely the rooftop of a palace of wonders and terrors beyond your imagination. To understand the universe beneath that grassy hill, you have to understand the mind of its architect. So let's leave the quiet fields of the present and drift back in time to the man himself, Qin Shi Huang. Before he was an emperor, he was a king presiding over a land of chaos. The China you picture today didn't exist. For centuries, the region was a fractured mess of 7 major states, all locked in a constant bloody struggle known as the Warring States period. Each had its own ruler, its own currency, its own writing, even its own width for the axles on its carts, meaning a wagon from one state would get stuck in the ruts of another. It was a world of division, and into this world came Yingzheng, the king of Qin. Through a breathtakingly brutal and efficient series of military campaigns, he did what no one had done before. One by one, he conquered all 6 rival states. In 221 BCE, he unified them into a single entity under his absolute rule. He declared himself Qin Shi Huang, which means first emperor of Qin, a title he invented because king was no longer grand enough for him. He had forged a nation. To ensure it stayed forged, he standardized everything. He melted down the weapons of his former enemies and cast them into bells and statues. He ordered the creation of a single currency, a single system of weights and measures And perhaps most importantly, a single standardized script so that an order written in the capital could be read at the farthest edge of his new empire. Think of it like forcing the entire world to use the same plug adapter and alphabet overnight. Historians still argue whether his cruelty was a necessary evil for unification or simply the indulgence of a tyrant. But as his power grew, so did a deep gnawing fear. For all his earthly omnipotence, he was powerless against one thing, his own mortality. This legendary unifier was terrified of dying. His later years became a frantic, obsessive search for the elixir of life. He dispatched alchemists and mystics across his empire on bizarre quests. The most famous of these was an expedition led by his court sorcerer, Xu Fu. The emperor sent him out to sea with a fleet of ships and hundreds of young men and women to find Penglai, a mythical island where the immortals were said to live and bring back the secret to eternal life. Xu Fu and his crew sailed into the Pacific and were never seen again, leaving the emperor to face his own inevitable end. Since he couldn't conquer death in this world, he decided he would build a next one he could rule instead. The tomb you're standing on wasn't just a burial chamber, it was Plan B. An empire for the afterlife isn't built overnight, and it isn't built by one man. Huang may have been the architect of the vision, but the tomb itself was raised on the backs of his people. So let your mind drift down from the abstract ambition of the emperor to the physical reality of the construction site. Imagine that peaceful grassy mound peeled back to reveal the raw earth of the 3rd century BCE. The first thing that would strike you is the scale of the workforce. Ancient sources claim that over 700,000 men were conscripted to labor on this project. To put that in perspective, that is a workforce larger than the entire population of modern-day Boston or Lisbon. It was a mobile city dedicated to a single colossal task. Construction began around 246 BCE, right after Yingzheng ascended to the throne of Qin as a young teenager. But it kicked into overdrive after he unified China in 221 BCE now, with the resources and manpower of an entire nation at his command. For 38 years, this place was a hive of activity. These weren't willing volunteers. They were farmers, pulled from their fields, skilled artisans from across the empire, and a vast number of convicts and prisoners from the states he had conquered. They were the unwilling builders of their own master's paradise. It remains a point of debate just how these laborers were managed and what the logistics of housing and feeding such a population even looked like. It was a feat of project management that rivaled the engineering itself. Now, imagine the scene. You're looking down into a chasm, a massive excavated pit, where thousands of men toil under the sun. You hear the rhythmic chip, chip, chip of countless chisels on stone, the groan of massive logs being dragged into place, the distant shouts of foremen, and the constant hum of a human anthill. The air smells of dust, sweat, and damp earth, and the work was as brutal as the emperor's military campaigns. But the most chilling part of their job came at the very end. The historical records tell a grim story. To ensure the tomb's secrets were kept safe forever, the innermost gates were closed on the very artisans and craftsmen who had built them. After the emperor's body and treasures were in place, the final doors were sealed, entombing the builders with their creation. They became the first and most silent guardians of the necropolis, their knowledge of its traps and layout forever locked away. The quiet hill you stand upon is a monument built with their bones, their sweat, and their silenced secrets. Those secrets were supposed to have died with their keepers sealed forever in the dark. So how, you might wonder, can we even begin to guess at the marvels constructed by those 700,000 souls? The answer lies not with an archaeologist's spade, but with a historian's pen. Our guide for this next part of the journey is a man named Sima Qian, and without him, the tomb would be a complete mystery. He was the court historian for the Han Dynasty, the one that rose after the Qin fell. Writing about a century after the first emperor's death, he took on the monumental task of documenting the entire history of China up to his time. His work, The Records of the Grand Historian, is the foundational text of Chinese history, our single most important window into that lost world. Now, Sima Qian wasn't just some dusty scribe. He was a man of incredible conviction. He wrote his masterpiece under the most trying circumstances imaginable, having been sentenced to castration by a wrathful emperor. He chose to endure this profound humiliation rather than the more honorable alternative of suicide. For one reason, he had to finish the historical record his father had started. This was a man who sacrificed everything for the sake of preserving history. So when he writes something down, it carries the weight of that sacrifice. And what he wrote about Qin Shi Huang's tomb is the reason we're talking tonight. For centuries, scholars debated whether Sima Qian's account was historical fact or literary embellishment. Imagine finding a single 2,000-year-old document describing a lost city complete with impossible architecture and fantastical defenses. You'd be skeptical, and for good reason. His descriptions were simply too wild to be believed. He wrote that the 700,000 workers were used to dig deep through 3 layers of groundwater and line the chamber with bronze. He wrote that the tomb contained palaces, towers, and models of the entire geography of China. And he described 2 features so extraordinary that they sealed his reputation as a teller of tall tales, a star-filled sky painted on the ceiling, and most famously, a map of the empire on the floor with its rivers and oceans recreated in shimmering flowing Mercury. It sounded like a myth, a legend. But as you'll soon see, some legends have a funny way of turning out to be true. Sima Qian gave us the blueprint, and now we must see what those blueprints describe. Let's follow Sima Qian's words deeper into the earth, past the bronze-lined walls, and into the heart of the emperor's sanctum. Imagine you are standing on a precipice in the deep, silent dark. Then a soft, ethereal glow begins to illuminate the chamber below, as if from unseen sources. As your eyes adjust, you realize you're looking down upon a vast miniature landscape stretching out before you. The floor is a map of the world Qin Shi Huang had conquered, a perfect replica of his empire. But it's the waterways that seize your attention. Snaking through the miniature mountains and plains are rivers not of water, but of shimmering liquid silver. This is the detail from Sima Qian's account that always sounded the most like pure fantasy. He wrote that the tomb contained 100 rivers, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, and the Great Sea, all forged from Mercury. You are looking at an estimated 100 tons of the stuff. Think about that for a moment. This is the same toxic heavy metal in an old-fashioned thermometer, the kind you're warned never to touch, but on a scale so massive it's almost incomprehensible. The rivers would have served 2 purposes. First, they were symbolic, allowing the emperor to eternally gaze upon the domain he had forged. But second, and more practically, they formed the most ingenious and deadly security system ever devised. Any tomb robber who managed to break through the outer layers and enter this chamber would be met with an atmosphere saturated with lethal, invisible mercury vapor. It's a silent, passive trap that never stops working. Herein lies a terrible irony. In his desperate quest for immortality, the emperor consumed so-called elixirs of life prescribed by his alchemists. Many of these potions contained high doses of mercury, which was thought to have life-extending properties. It's highly likely that the very substance he believed would make him immortal was actually poisoning him, contributing to his paranoia and eventual death at the age of 49. The element that failed to preserve his life in this world was now tasked with preserving his body in the next. Sima Qian adds one more baffling detail. He claims these rivers were set to flow mechanically. Engineers still debate how exactly this mechanical circulation was achieved. Was it a complex system of understated water wheels or some other lost technology designed to mimic the currents of the real world? For now, just imagine the sight: a silent, toxic silver sea perpetually flowing around the Emperor's final resting place. Your gaze has been fixed on the shimmering toxic floor, a perfect replica of the Earth. Now slowly lift your head and look up. Above the flowing mercury rivers and the miniature mountains, you expect to see rock and earth. Instead, you see the night sky. Sima Qian's description of the tomb didn't end with the ground. He wrote that the ceiling of the chamber was painted with a map of the heavens, a complete representation of the cosmos. You are standing inside a perfect universe in miniature. Below you is the earth, above you are the heavens, and you are suspended in the space between. Imagine a vast domed ceiling, lacquered in the deepest, most absolute black. And set into that darkness are the stars. But they aren't dabs of paint. Following the historian's account, these are pearls and precious gems, each one carefully selected and placed to represent a specific star or planet. The Big Dipper, the celestial palaces of the zodiac, the pole star, all are there, gleaming with a soft, timeless light. It's like being in the most opulent planetarium ever conceived, one built not with projectors, but with a fortune in jewels, all for an audience of one. Experts still debate which specific astronomical maps were used. Are we looking at the sky as it appeared on the night the emperor died, or the night he was born? Or is it an idealized map of the eternal circumpolar stars that never set? This celestial ceiling was more than just a beautiful decoration. It was a profound statement of power. The ancient Chinese were brilliant astronomers, and they believed the events in the heavens were directly linked to the authority of the emperor on earth. The ruler was the son of heaven, the link between the divine cosmos and the mortal world. By recreating the heavens in his tomb, Qin Shi Huang was ensuring his divine mandate would continue into the afterlife. He wasn't just the emperor of China. He was the emperor of the universe he had built for himself. But how was this incredible diorama lit? The tomb is sealed from any natural light. Here Sima Qian gives us a strange, almost mythical detail. He says the chamber was lit by candles made from the fat of the man-fish, likely a whale or walrus. These were thought to be capable of burning for an incredibly long time, designed to keep the emperor's universe illuminated long after the last builder was gone. So you stand there in the faint, everlasting glow of these impossible lamps, caught between a jeweled sky and a mercury sea. This perfect universe of mercury and pearls is a breathtaking sight, but it is not a welcoming one. It was designed to be sealed, to be left alone for eternity. And the emperor, ever the meticulous planner, knew that locks and secrets might not be enough to deter the greedy or the curious. So he installed a security system. Forget motion-activated cameras or silent alarms. Qin Shi Huang's methods were a bit more direct and a lot more permanent. Sima Qian wrote that the imperial craftsmen were commanded to build and install crossbows and arrows rigged to fire automatically at anyone who broke into the tomb. Let that image settle in. Hidden in the passageways leading to the central chamber, nestled in alcoves obscured by shadow, are these ancient engines of death. Imagine tripwires made of silk or gut stretched taut just above the floor. Picture pressure plates disguised as ordinary flagstones connected to complex bronze triggers. You take one wrong step in the dark, and you are greeted by a volley of bolts. The technology was certainly there. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Qin army's dominance was partly thanks to their incredibly advanced crossbows. Archaeologists have unearthed their intricate mass-produced bronze trigger mechanisms near the tomb complex. They were masterpieces of engineering, durable and deadly, the cutting edge of military tech in the 3rd century BCE. Now, there is considerable debate among historians and engineers as to how these crossbows could remain functional for over 2,000 years. The wooden bows and hemp strings would surely have rotted away. But some speculate the mechanisms were made of more durable materials, or perhaps designed to be self-arming, using a system of levers and weights activated by the opening of a sealed door. The specifics are a mystery, but the intention is crystal clear. And these machines may not be the only defense. Some historians wonder if the crossbows were just the most obvious part of a layered system. Were there also psychological traps? Dead-end corridors designed to confuse and disorient, perhaps even rumored curses inscribed on the walls to prey on the minds of intruders. Whatever the full extent of the plan, the image of those crossbows remains the most potent. They are silent, patient guardians, waiting in the dark, with a tension they have held for over 2 millennia, ready to welcome anyone who dares disturb the Emperor's sleep. The Emperor's security plan didn't begin at the tomb door with a crossbow trigger. It began nearly a mile away, buried under the same unassuming farmland, with a silent and eternal show of force. Most people throughout history have been content with a strong gate or a high wall to protect their property. Qin Shi Huang's idea of home security involved commissioning an entire army. So let's pull our imagination away from the sealed inner sanctum and move to one of the nearby pits, a place accidentally discovered in our own time. The air here is different, less filled with the imagined dread of traps, and more with a profound static awe. You are standing on a walkway, looking down into a vast excavated trench. And there they are. Rank upon rank, row upon silent row, stands an army of soldiers frozen in mid-formation. This is the world-famous Terracotta Army. There are thousands of them visible, but archaeologists estimate the pits hold a total of over 8,000 soldiers, along with hundreds of chariots and horses, all crafted from baked earth. They are life-sized, arranged in perfect battle formation, facing east the direction of the lands he conquered, and from where any threat to his afterlife might emerge. For more than 2,000 years, they have stood guard here in the absolute dark, a ghostly legion, waiting for a battle that never came. At first, the sheer scale is overwhelming. But then you start to notice the details. You look closer at the individual soldiers and you realize something astonishing. While their bodies were made from molds, each face is unique. The artists gave them different expressions, different mustaches and beards, and intricately detailed hairstyles that denote their rank. You see stern veterans, youthful archers, and stoic officers. They aren't just statues. They are clay portraits of the real men who formed the emperor's invincible army. But there is a secret to them that we have only recently understood. A long-standing debate revolved around whether the warriors were originally painted. We now know they were. Imagine these gray figures bursting with color armor laced with brilliant red ribbons, faces painted with lifelike skin tones, robes of royal purple and vibrant green. Tragically, this ancient paint is incredibly fragile. Upon excavation and exposure to our modern dry air, the lacquer underneath the paint curls and flakes away in minutes, taking the colors with it. The silent gray army we see today is only a ghost of the vibrant, lifelike force the emperor created to guard his eternal sleep. An emperor, even in the afterlife, does not live by war alone. That silent, steadfast army is there to protect and to project power. But what about the life that goes on behind the battle lines? What about the daily functions of the state, the culture of the court, the diversions and entertainments the first emperor, in his boundless ambition, planned for that as well? His vision for eternity was not one of lonely militaristic vigil. He planned to continue his entire life. And so, as archaeologists explored the areas around the Great Mound, they found other pits, smaller and stranger than the ones holding the army. Pits that reveal the civilian side of his subterranean world. Imagine stumbling upon another trench, but instead of soldiers, you find bureaucrats. Here are terracotta figures believed to represent the officials and scribes of the Qin government, frozen at their eternal posts. Archaeologists still debate the exact function of these figures, but their placid, dignified postures suggest they are here to run the empire of the dead. They are the administrators, the logisticians, the keepers of records, ensuring that the emperor's spiritual domain runs as efficiently as his earthly one. It's a testament to his obsession with control and order, an afterlife managed by a clay bureaucracy. It's the ultimate afterlife starter pack, complete with an army, a civil service, and as it turns out, an entertainment system. Because in another, even more surprising pit, archaeologists found the court performers. Here are not soldiers, but musicians, their hands positioned forever on silent zithers and flutes. And next to them, something truly remarkable, a troupe of terracotta acrobats and strongmen. Unlike the rigid infantrymen, these figures are dynamic, captured in poses of athletic grace and power. And to leave no doubt about their purpose, found with them was a gigantic bronze cauldron weighing nearly 500 pounds. This wasn't just a decorative object. Cauldron lifting was a popular feat of strength and a form of courtly entertainment at the time. The emperor had brought his own personal circus with him. So now expand your mental picture of this place. It is not just a tomb guarded by an army. It is a complete self-contained replica of the imperial court. It has its soldiers, its government, and its entertainers all waiting to serve their emperor. He wasn't just planning to be dead. He was planning to be alive in a different place, surrounded by all the familiar comforts and functions of the world he had created. For 2 millennia, all of this, the silent army, the clay court, the booby-trapped passages, and the Mercury Sea, lay silent and forgotten, buried under layers of earth and time. The Great Tomb Mound was known, but it was just a local feature, a hill named Mount Lee that kids would play on. The vast necropolis surrounding it was a complete secret. Generations of farmers planted their crops, raised their families, and lived their lives right on top of an underground empire, and no one ever knew. Then on a hot, dry afternoon, In March of 1974, that silence was broken by the scrape of a shovel. There was a drought that year in Shanxi province, and the crops were failing. A group of brothers, local farmers, decided the only solution was to dig a new well. Led by a man named Yang Jifa, they chose a spot in a persimmon orchard and started digging. Imagine the scene, the sun beating down the air, thick with dust, the rhythmic work of men trying to save their livelihood. They dug down, tossing aside dirt and rock. And then, about 15 feet down, one of the shovels hit something hard. It wasn't the dull thud of rock. It was a sharper, more hollow sound. Curious, they began to dig more carefully around the object. They uncovered what looked like a shoulder and then a neck made of a strange reddish earth. And then they lifted out a complete life-sized head sculpted from terracotta. Its eyes were open, its expression serene. They had no idea what they were looking at. They weren't thinking priceless archaeological treasure. They were thinking they'd hit an old temple or perhaps disturbed an ancient guardian spirit. They nicknamed the find a Hua Yao, or pottery god, and some of the men were afraid it was a terrible omen. It's a subject of local talk, how for generations, farmers in the area had occasionally unearthed strange terracotta fragments when plowing their fields. They were oddities, curiosities, but no one ever grasped what they were a part of. This time was different. After some debate, Yang Jifa reported the find to the local authorities. The initial response was slow, but soon an archaeologist from a nearby museum came to investigate. And when he saw that clay head and the pit, it came from the modern world, began to realize that the fairy tales written by Sima Qian might not be fairy tales at all. A simple search for water had revealed the guardians of an emperor's soul. The discovery of that first terracotta warrior sent a shock wave around the world. Suddenly, the writings of Sima Qian weren't just a historical curiosity, they were a potential treasure map. If the army was real, in all its impossible scale and detail, then what about the rest of his story? What about the tomb mound itself, the one everyone knew about, but no one had ever dared to open? What about the Mercury seas and the jeweled ceiling? The world was desperate to know, but this created a huge problem. To open the tomb would be to risk destroying it. The sudden influx of oxygen and moisture could disintegrate ancient silks, lacquers, and paints in an instant, just like the tragic fading of the warrior's colors. So how do you peek inside a 200-year-old sealed box without ever lifting the lid? You turn to technology that feels like magic. In recent decades, scientists have turned the entire tomb mound into a patient, giving it the equivalent of a full-body medical scan. Instead of shovels, they use invisible eyes. One of the main techniques is called electrical resistivity tomography. In simple terms, they stick probes into the ground and pass a weak electrical current through the hill. Different materials underground, packed earth, a stone wall, a void, a concentration of metal, resist that current in different ways. By measuring these differences, they can create a rough 2D map of the structures hidden below. Then there is ground-penetrating radar, which sends radio pulses down into the earth and carefully listens for the echoes that bounce back, creating a kind of sonogram of the subterranean layers. Using these methods, and others like magnetic and gravity scans, researchers have been able to create a ghostly blueprint of what lies beneath your feet. And the results have been stunning. The scans have confirmed the existence of a massive rectangular wall surrounding the central tomb, exactly as described in the ancient texts. They've identified a large raised structure at the center believed to be the underground palace containing the emperor's coffin. The interpretation of this remote sensing data is a complex science, and scientists still debate the precise nature of some anomalies, but the basic outlines are clear. Sima Qian was telling the truth. Even more tantalizing, the scans have revealed strange voids and features not mentioned in any text, hinting at secret passages or hidden chambers. We are in essence digitally excavating the tomb, using the hum of sensitive equipment to trace the edges of a world no one has seen for over 2 millennia. Those invisible eyes, the radar, and the resistivity scans gave scientists a ghostly outline of the Emperor's palace. They could see the where, but they couldn't confirm the what. The scans showed shapes and voids, but they couldn't prove the existence of something as specific and strange as 100 tons of liquid metal. How could you prove the Mercury legend without opening the tomb? The answer, it turned out, was not to look for the rivers themselves, but for their ghost. The scientists came up with a brilliant hypothesis. If a massive quantity of mercury has been sitting in a sealed chamber for 2,200 years, it must have left a trace. Mercury, even at room temperature, slowly evaporates, creating vapor. Over 2 millennia, that vapor would have slowly, painstakingly seeped through tiny cracks in the structure and permeated the soil above. The tomb would be breathing evidence. So began one of the most patient and methodical forensic investigations in history. Researchers laid a massive, precise grid over the entire grassy mound. They then began taking soil samples, drilling small cores out of the earth at regular intervals across the whole grid. Thousands of samples were taken, each one carefully bagged and labeled with its exact coordinates. It was quiet, meticulous work. And when those samples were taken back to the lab and tested, they told a story that no one had dared to fully believe. Most of the soil from the mound showed normal background levels of mercury. But in one very specific rectangular area, right on top of the suspected location of the central palace, the mercury levels spiked to hundreds of times higher than normal. The tomb had, in effect, been exhaling its greatest secret for 22 centuries. The soil itself was contaminated in a pattern that perfectly matched the suspected location of the emperor's burial chamber. And here is the most astonishing detail of all, a quirky tidbit that sends a shiver down the spine. The map of the high mercury concentrations appears to roughly match the layout of China's major waterways, with distinct areas of higher concentration where the Yangtze and Yellow rivers would be. Sima Qian's account was vindicated by modern chemistry. While the exact quantity, whether it's the legendary 100 tons, remains a subject of intense speculation, the presence of a massive, unprecedented amount of mercury is now accepted as fact. The legend was real, and that confirmation changed everything. The soil tests confirming the Mercury Sea were a triumphant moment for science and history. They proved that the ancient legends were true, but that very confirmation also created a monumental problem. The tomb was no longer a myth. It was a tangible, priceless, and unimaginably fragile treasure box. And this realization sparked the greatest debate in modern archaeology, a question that fiercely divides experts to this day: should we open it? You now stand before this ultimate preservation dilemma, weighing the fate of the Emperor's universe. On one hand, the argument for excavation is intoxicating. Imagine what could be inside. Based on the level of preservation seen in other lesser tombs from the era, archaeologists expect to find artifacts in near-perfect condition. Silk banners, with colors as rich as the day they were woven, intricate lacquerware furniture that hasn't seen the light of day for millennia. and perhaps even the emperor's personal chariot and coffin. More valuable than any gold or jewels would be the potential for lost texts. Any bamboo slips or silk scrolls within could rewrite our understanding of the Qin dynasty and ancient Chinese history. To open the tomb would be to answer thousands of questions and illuminate a lost world. It is the ultimate prize for human knowledge. But then you must weigh the catastrophic risk. This is the official position of the Chinese government and the core of the argument against opening the tomb. We simply do not have the technology to do it safely. Remember the vibrant paint on the terracotta warriors, which flaked away to dust within minutes of exposure to air. The central tomb chamber would be 1,000 times more complex. The sudden change in humidity and atmosphere could cause irreparable damage, turning priceless artifacts into piles of dust before they could even be properly documented. It's the archaeological equivalent of science fiction's prime directive. The very act of observing could destroy the subject of your observation. Beyond the technical challenges are the ethical ones. This is, after all, a man's grave. Do we have the right to disturb his eternal rest for our own curiosity? Then there is the very real physical danger from the mercury vapors and the still unknown nature of the ancient booby traps. Some even whisper of a curse, a cultural reluctance to disturb the slumber of the formidable first emperor. And so we are left with a choice risk, destroying history's greatest treasure for the sake of knowing, or have the patience to leave it sealed, hoping that some future generation will have the wisdom and the tools to do it right. And so, the tomb remains sealed, a silent presence in the heart of China, protected by its own dangers and by our deliberate patience. But its silence doesn't mean it isn't powerful. Today, the mausoleum speaks with two very different and conflicting voices. On one hand, it is a magnificent cultural treasure. It is a profound symbol of the birth of a unified China and a showcase of the incredible ingenuity and artistic skill of its ancient people. In 1987, it was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized as a treasure belonging to all of humanity. For millions of people, it is a source of immense national pride, a testament to a glorious and powerful history. The gleam of a terracotta general's armor in a museum display reflects the strength of a nation. This is the tomb as a masterpiece. But there is another voice that whispers from that grassy mound. It speaks of the cost. This is the legacy of the tomb as a cursed monument. It is a monument built not just of earth, but of the suffering of the 700,000 people who were forced to build it. It is haunted by the ghosts of the convicts who died from exhaustion, and of the artisans who were sealed alive within its walls to protect its secrets. In this light, the tomb is not a marvel of engineering, but a scar left by tyranny. Its splendor is tainted by the immense human price that was paid for it. The emperor's legacy remains one of the most contentious subjects in Chinese history, with scholars constantly reevaluating whether he should be remembered as a visionary founder or a monstrous despot. His tomb is the perfect symbol of this debate, much like the Roman Colosseum, an architectural wonder where people were condemned to die for sport. This idea of a curse exists on a more mystical level as well. A persistent local belief holds that the tomb mound is a vital point in the region's feng shui, the traditional art of spiritual geography. According to this legend, disturbing the tomb could disrupt the cosmic balance of the entire landscape, potentially leading to misfortune or natural disasters. So the curse is not just about the emperor's wrath. but about upsetting a delicate natural harmony. The tomb therefore exists in this strange dual state. It is both a wonder and a warning, a source of pride, and a reminder of pain. Its true power today lies in this very contradiction, forcing us to grapple with the uncomfortable truth that beauty and brutality are often inseparable in the great monuments of human history. But now, let's let all of that fall away. Strip away the modern debates, the UNESCO status, the tourists, and the scientists. For one last moment, let's go back to the hill. Let your mind drift down through the packed earth, past the silent clay armies and the ghostly terracotta court. You move through the dark, imagined passageways, past the patient crossbows, until you arrive at the very heart of the necropolis. You are standing before the final door. It is not gilded or covered in jewels. It is simply a massive slab of stone, perfectly fitted, that has not been moved in more than 2,000 years. The silence here is absolute. It is the silence of the deep earth of a sealed chamber of a dead emperor. Behind this door lies the man himself, Qin Shi Huang. And what of the man inside? Historians will forever debate his true nature. But we know he died far from home in 210 BCE, while touring his empire, still searching for the secret to eternal life. His own prime minister was so terrified of the chaos that would erupt that he kept the death a secret, smuggling the emperor's body back to the capital in a procession with carts of rotting fish traveling alongside the imperial chariot to mask the smell of a decaying emperor. It was an ignominious end for a man so obsessed with control. Now, he lies here in the center of his perfect miniature universe. Some wilder interpretations of Sima Qian's text even suggest his coffin isn't resting on the floor, but is designed to float upon the sea of Mercury, forever adrift in his own private cosmos. He failed in his quest to live forever. And yet, in a way, didn't he succeed? He created a mystery that has captivated the world. His name is known by billions. His tomb, the ultimate expression of his ego and his genius, remains unconquered, protected not just by its legendary traps, but by the sheer audacity of its design. Behind that simple stone door he waits. The first and only emperor of a universe of his own creation, still holding all of his secrets. And for now, we leave him there to his long and silent sleep. So now, let the image of that silent stone door begin to slowly dissolve, fading back into the soft darkness of your room. The journey is over, and the secrets of the tomb are once again safe sealed by distance and by time. The emperor is at peace in his jeweled, starlit chamber, and you can be at peace in yours. Let go of the thoughts of Mercury rivers and clay soldiers, and just feel the gentle weight of your blankets, the slow and easy rhythm of your own breathing. There are no more histories to explore tonight, no more ancient mysteries to solve. There is only the quiet of this moment and the comfortable path to a deep and restful sleep. Let the soft background hum of the fan be the only sound you follow now, as it guides you gently into your own quiet dreams. Sweet dreams.